All right, here we go with a brand new chapter. The title of this chapter is Muscle Anatomy. In the last chapter, we focused on muscle physiology and we did sliding filament theory, how the muscle moves. And what we're going to do here is we're going to look at where the muscles are located and how they attach to the bones, some of the general terms that we use when we talk about muscle movement. So if you're going to go into exercise physiology or physical therapy, this topic should be a little bit of more interest to you because this is going to be your bread and butter. So when we talk about the number of muscles, we know with the bones we have 206, but with the muscles, we talk about having a range of 650 to 750 muscles. Well, that's a pretty big range. What gives? Well, two anatomists can look at the same muscle, and one anatomist can say, I think this is made up of two smaller muscles, and the second anatomist can say, I think that's a single muscle. The definition between muscles is much more vague than it is with bones. With bones, you definitely have a bone. Muscles, it's a little bit subject to interpretation. So that's a lot. Now, if you're going to be a doctor, you'll have to learn all of them. I heard a story about a student who once had to learn all of the information about the muscles, and he had it all on flashcards. He started at 8 and he got done at noon going through his flashcards. Luckily, that's not going to be us. We're not going to do quite that many. We're looking at maybe doing, 30 to 40 of the major muscles, starting with the muscles of the head and neck and then moving down the body. If you remember, we divide our muscles into 3 groups. So we had cardiac, and we did muscle tissue, or we did tissues, skeletal, and we have smooth. So 3 different categories. We can look at muscles. This chapter is all skeletal. So when we're talking about muscle anatomy, we're talking about skeletal muscle anatomy. And in this first note or video, we're going to talk about kind of how we can group muscles. So we can group muscles based on where they're found. And when we talk about the location of muscles, we talk about origin insertion. Origin is, we're going to define that as the primary muscle attachment. And we're going to define the insertion as the secondary. Muscle attachment. So in other words, when we talk about the origin, we're talking about where a muscle starts and where it ends or stops. And the movement is very specific. The way that we can tell origin and insertion, I'm a little out of focus here, I'm going to try to focus this up, is we talk about the fact that the insertion moves towards the origin. So if you take your arm and you flex, you are flexing your bicep, you'll notice that your forearm, make a wrist or a fist with your hand, you'll notice your fist moves up towards your shoulder. Well, the biceps originate up on the shoulder and they insert on the forearm. So the insertion moves towards the origin. You do the same thing with leg muscles. If you put your ear to your shoulder, you have your sternocleidomastoid, we're going to learn on the side. Well, you see that the bottom of your skull is moving towards your shoulder. It actually originates on the clavicle and inserts on the mastoid process of the skull. So you have, did I say that correctly? Origin on, yeah. You have the insertion on the skull moving towards the origin on the collarbone. We're only going to learn about a half dozen origin insertions, and several of them are going to be on the head and neck. Another way we can look at muscles or we can group muscles is by shape. So we can look at the shapes of muscles, and the most common shape is what's called a parallel muscle. a parallel arrangement. And it looks a little bit like this. So we would have tendons up here. This would be a tendon, which attaches the muscle to bone. We would have a tendon down here. And the muscle fibers would run this direction, parallel to each other. You'll notice that we have a thicker portion to a parallel arranged muscle, and that's this area here. And we call that the belly of the muscle, which is the fattest part of a parallel arranged muscle. I can't talk today for some reason, but this isn't the only type of arrangement we have. Another one we're going to see looks like this, and the muscle comes down to a point. This is a convergent arrangement. So you have the insertion is down here, the origin is up here, and an example of this is going to be our shoulder muscles, the deltoids. So for now, we're just going to call them shoulder, but we're going to learn that this is the deltoid. Is one of the best examples we have of a convergent arrangement. Another one we have is when the muscle fibers go in a circular. So a circular arrangement is called a sphincter. You have 3 of these on your face. They're also found at the anus. So maybe you've heard the word sphincter before, but this is a circular arrangement. We can arrange muscles or discuss muscles based on how they interact with each other. So we have these terms: prime mover, antagonist, and synergist. So the prime mover is the muscle that is responsible for a given motion. So for example, your bicep, which by the way has this arrangement, when you flex to that bicep and you pulled that wrist towards your shoulder, the bicep became the prime mover. So let's do an example here. So if your bicep is the prime mover, the muscle that's going to undo that motion or works in opposition to the prime mover, we say the antagonist works in opposition to the prime mover. So if we're using the bicep as the prime mover, the antagonist to that would be tricep. So if I flex my bicep and I want to undo that, it's the tricep that undoes it. So these two always work in opposite. Another example will be as a group, your quadriceps and your hamstrings. Your quadriceps flex and your hamstrings extend. So what's a synergist? A synergist assists the prime mover. Synergist assists the prime mover. So your brachialis is located in between your bicep and your tricep, and that would be a synergist. It's going to help either the bicep or the tricep. And you'll see that when we talk about motion, it's pretty complicated. It's often not just a single motion, but a group of muscles working together. So, and we're going to see that the names, another little tidbit here, the names of muscles often end in IS or ALIS. So this is our suffix. Kind of like we've seen that enzymes end in ASE, carbohydrates like lactose, glucose end in OSE, bones often end in AL. The suffixes for muscles are IS or ALIS. So for example, the muscle that's on the front of your head is the frontalis. We just take front and we add ALIS. Okay, the next lesson we're going to do in class, we're going to look at the different terms that we have for motion, like abduction and adduction. Because you guys know your Latin terms, that should really kind of be reviewed for you anyways. And then we're going to jump in lesson 2 to going into the muscle group, learning their names, learning where they're located and what they do. I don't remember if I mentioned it in the previous or in the subsequent videos, so I'm just going to add that here. This might be duplicate information, but just to be safe. The other thing, so as we go through and we're talking about location and function, you have what's called OIAI. This is an I. For origin, insertion, action, and the other I stands for innervation. So if you're going to go into medicine, if you're going to be a doctor, for every muscle group, you have to learn origin, insertion, action, and innervation. Origin is, again, what we talked about here, where the muscle starts, where it inserts. Action is what it does. Innervation are the nerves that supply the signals to that skeletal muscle. We're going to try to learn actions for most of our muscles. We're going to do origin and insertion for just a couple, and we're not going to really target innervation. All right, that gives us what we need to get started. I will see you guys in the next video. That's all for this one.